The hidden agenda behind Trump's Caribbean military campaign. When Donald Trump announced his new war on drugs, many expected a crackdown inside U.S. borders. But instead, American warships and aircraft have appeared in the Caribbean, targeting boats allegedly carrying narcotics from Venezuela. The U.S. military has sunk several vessels in international waters off Venezuela's coast, with Trump defending the strikes as part of a campaign against narco-terrorists. Washington describes it as the largest regional military operation of this century, one that also happens to put direct pressure on Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro. For nearly 2 decades, the massive Roosevelt Roads naval base in Puerto Rico stood silent after its closure in 2004. Now, the base is active again, housing state-of-the-art fighter jets, Reaper drones, and Osprey aircraft. The U.S. buildup isn't limited to Puerto Rico. Warships and submarines are now operating throughout the Caribbean Sea. Experts note the scale of this operation goes far beyond any traditional counter-narcotics mission. According to analysts, Trump's team has labeled various Latin American criminal groups, including Venezuela's Tren de Aragua, as terrorist organizations. In Trump's view, Maduro himself sits atop a cartel-run state. Recent U.S. strikes have killed dozens of alleged smugglers, drawing condemnation from UN human rights officials, who described the attacks as unlawful and extrajudicial. Previously, the U.S. Coast Guard would intercept such boats, arrest suspects, and gather intelligence. Now, those vessels are being destroyed outright. Venezuela's geography makes it a prime route for global drug shipments. With its vast Caribbean coastline, much of the contraband bound for both North America and Europe passes through its waters. Yet some analysts argue that if this campaign were truly about U.S. drug routes, the Pacific Ocean, not the Caribbean, would be the logical focus. Trump's fixation on Maduro isn't new. During his first term, Washington charged Maduro with narco-terrorism and placed a bounty on his capture, a figure now raised to $50 million, twice what was once offered for Osama bin Laden. Critics say Maduro doesn't directly control a cartel, but has instead allowed criminal groups and traffickers to operate in exchange for political loyalty and financial gain. Trump, meanwhile, continues to frame his campaign as both a war on drugs and a war on terror. The United States opioid and fentanyl crises have claimed hundreds of thousands of lives, giving Trump's rhetoric domestic appeal. Still, many observers believe the Caribbean deployment aims to force political change in Venezuela rather than simply curb narcotics. Maduro has responded by rallying troops and warning of a possible state of emergency if the U.S. launches further strikes. Reports even suggest that a covert CIA mission has been authorized. The heart of the standoff is Venezuela's immense oil wealth. Despite having the largest proven reserves on Earth, decades of corruption and economic mismanagement have left the industry in ruins and millions of citizens impoverished. Since Hugo Chávez's presidency, relations between Washington and Caracas have deteriorated sharply. The U.S. refuses to recognize Maduro's re-election and continues to support opposition figures, many of whom have fled the country or been imprisoned. Analysts believe the current American strategy is to fracture Venezuela's military, the main pillar of Maduro's regime, and weaken his grip from within. The idea recalls past U.S. interventions, including the 1989 invasion of Panama to remove a leader wanted on drug charges. Although Trump publicly promised to avoid new wars, his administration's posture in the Caribbean signals a more assertive, even imperial, approach. During a visit to a warship in Puerto Rico, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth called it a floating island of American power. Some regional governments, weary of rampant violence linked to drug cartels, have quietly welcomed the American presence. Nations such as Trinidad and Tobago view it as a stabilizing force near Venezuela's borders. However, global powers like China and Russia, both of whom have investments and alliances in Venezuela, are watching closely. Analysts suggest that by asserting dominance in the Western Hemisphere, Washington effectively gives Moscow and Beijing license to do the same in their own regions. The broader picture reveals something larger than a simple anti-drug campaign. The buildup represents a show of force, a defense of U.S. strategic interests, and perhaps a revival of the centuries-old Monroe Doctrine, America's claim to supremacy in the Western Hemisphere.